welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. All right, we're here for some more Higurashi no Nakukoru ni Chapter 4 Himatsubushi. Mitsubishi. I forgot what's it called. Mitsubushi. Okay. So yeah, last time we did a little bit of talking with several people, mostly played some games with Oyoshi, brought back some of the what's it called? Like the early chapter vibes, of just like hanging out with people and playing games and stuff. Playing games is clearly a very important thing. I don't know if maybe the activity of playing something, like a game with someone is something that Ryukishi personally really treasures. Like he really finds that to be something very intimate and personal that he values. Like he has good memories doing that. Because he seems to keep bringing it back, of this idea of just playing games. Obviously, that is a part of the story of the sort of the innocence of friendship and camaraderie, and just fun activities that you can do with people, essentially being taken away by the complexity of the world, of how the world won't let you have those simple joys, consistently, due to whether it be to political reasons, community reasons, just something terrible happening to someone, just all those things. So he clearly associates playing games and stuff with that sort of something you lose when the world inheats upon you, essentially. Which is interesting. I know Togashi, the writer of Hunter x Hunter, he in particular really likes games, which is why games are usually a big part of his stories. Obviously there's Greed Island, where they go inside a video game, but then there's also Chimera Ant, where a huge a pretty important portion of that story is essentially two people playing a game together. So also forgot his name. Takahashi, the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh. What's his name? Kazuki Takahashi. Yeah. He in particularly loves games, just playing games, and he thinks that's what'll bring the world together. That's what'll bring world peace, is if you play games. So it's interesting seeing the element of the idea of playing games as something that's sacred within this series. And yeah, we played games with Oyoshi, and he sort of we learned a couple of other things, essentially the family knows two very important things. The family knows that Akasaka is pretty much here from the police department to investigate, and also that yes, they are aware that they kidnapped the son of the person, the government official. So yeah, that's where we're at now. It's the next day, and Akasaka, I think, decided he's gonna go back. He's gonna go back to the town and see what's up. What's going on. All right, in my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. I had a restless night asleep. I did nothing but turn over repeatedly during the night, and seemed like it lasted for eternity. Wait, hold on. Okay. Even then, I eventually fell asleep at some point, not realizing how high in the sky the sun has risen. I shook off the urge to go back to sleep. It was then that I noticed that the phone was ringing. Oh, did he forget to tell his boss? Yeah, this is what happened. Again, the time was the time was almost 10:30 in the morning. It was clearly too late for a wake-up call. Oh, actually, no, it's Oyoshi. Because I remember he forgot to tell his supervisor or whatever, oh, this is what happened, report in, essentially. Yeah, I know your voice, asshole. And if I didn't, I would recognize that stupid laugh. Yo, I hate his laugh, bro. Like, I'm sick of his fucking laugh. This guy's a fucking asshole. Wake up to the sound of Oyoshi's voice was a little much of a shock. Yeah, no shit, man. My delicate ears were ringing. Yeah, my ears would ring too. But thanks to that shock, I was suddenly wide awake.
ああ、どうも。
どうも。
おはようございます。
おはようございます。
ひょっとして今お目覚めですか？出張中とはいえ勤務時間には起きないといけませんよ。
ねえ。
まったくです。以後、気をつけます。
あなたの眠気をもう一つ覚ましてあげられるかもしれない話が、ひなみ沢駐在所から届いた遺失物に興味深いものが混じって。
遺失物？
詳しい話はこちらにいらっしゃってからにしましょう。
Huh. Interesting mixing the lost and
お昼
found.
前に来れますか？
いえ、すぐに伺います。
Oyoshi already knew what my mission was. Since Oyoshi said it was something that would wake me up, it was hard to believe that it would be irrelevant to me. Honestly speaking, judging by the information from Sato-san yesterday, knowing that my cover was already blown, I couldn't wander to and from Hinamizawa carelessly. In other words, my investigation was at an impasse. If there was some information there that could put me back on the trail, that would be nothing less than a stroke of good fortune. After vigorously washing my face, I pulled on my jacket and hailed the taxi, heading towards the Okinomiya police station.
Oh, 来た来た。
Yo, I'm here, bro. Like, it was fast as shit.
遅くなって申し訳ありません。で、一体何が出たんですか？
With absolutely no intention of reminiscing about last night's Mahjong game, I pressed him to get to the point. Oyoshi, anticipating that I would act that way, cut to the chase without any resistance.
先ほども申し上げましたが、今朝、ひなみ沢の駐在所から遺失物が届きました。
Lost items that were turned over to the police box were sent to Okinomiya Station after the paperwork was filled out. Oyoshi pulled out a plastic bag from the drawer and labeled content on this.
ですか？
でしょうな。中には小銭はあってもお札はなかったもんなんで、スリが中身を抜いた後に捨ててったのかななんて思ったんですがね。
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that would make sense.
最初は。
I didn't understand how a wallet so far removed from Tokyo could possibly be related to the kidnapping. If it had drawn Oyoshi's attention, it would have to be something dramatic, like if the wallet belonged to the missing grandchild. That would be absurd. Like something that convenient would happen. If that was it, then there would probably be initials written on the wallet. Like the initials of Toshiki Inukai, the minister's grandson, T.I. Thinking like that, at this point, I didn't suppose that this wallet was something that could get Oyoshi so excited. Oyoshi, after putting on a pair of disposable plastic gloves, handed me a pair of the same. I didn't feel that this wallet was such an important thing, so I had my doubts about whether there was any point in putting on gloves. However, I didn't want Oyoshi's intentions to go to waste, so I put them on. Oyoshi opened up the plastic bag and pulled out, showing me the back. As I had imagined, there were initials engraved there, but it was slightly more detailed than what I had thought with. It was slightly more detailed than what I had thought, with Toshi I marked on it. Toshiki I. Oyoshi grinned at me with a look on his face that said, "See?" I can confirm from that this belonged to the minister's grandson, informed him calmly. This wallet was irrelevant. It was nothing more than Oyoshi's over eagerness. First of all, there was absolutely no way in this distinct locale that the missing grandson's wallet would be found with such a convenient timing. After all, the Onikafushi Gardens wasn't related to the case in the first place, so there was no way the wallet belonged to the grandson. Why I wanted to decide that was the case, I didn't really know. Even though what should have been a top secret case was leaked before I had even begun dispatch. In this situation, how could I say this was definitely unrelated? Would it be more prudent to pay more attention to this wallet? It had only been a couple of days since I arrived in Hinamizawa, but in those couple of days, due to the number of remarkable events, my nerves might have been just a little fried. Shaking my head slightly, I cleared it of unnecessary thoughts. Ooshi opened up the wallet zipper, revealing the contents. Inside was small change and a number of crumpled receipts. Ooshi from that jumble pulled out a folded card. Seeing that, my heart stopped for a moment. It was a card from the dental examination. The name Toshiki Inukai and the age. A perfect match. The dentist located was in Tokyo. There was no need to explain any further. How far was it from Tokyo to Hinamizawa? It was far enough that taking the bullet train and car would still take several hours. Why would a wallet with a dental examination card from Tokyo inside show up in Hinamizawa? Could it belong to a tourist who came from Tokyo? Or maybe a villager on vacation to Tokyo just happened to pay a visit to the dentist? No, it had to have fallen into someone's bag by accident. In my mind, I desperately struggled to find the possible excuse as to why this wallet didn't belong to Toshiki Inukai. It was as if it just wouldn't do for this wallet to belong to him. However, weeding out the possibility for error one by one, the haze surrounding the wallet in front of me faded, gradually letting it come into clear focus. I felt a shiver of electricity run up my spine. My pulse quickened and the thin film of sweat began to coat my entire body. From Oyoshi's point of view, I was probably slack-jawed and spaced out, with a slovenly look on my face.
そりゃ赤坂さんの私はまだそこまでは。
この財布はいつ頃のものでしょうね。
拾ったのは村人です。昨日のことだそうで。
じゃなくて、この財布はいつ頃落ちたものでしょうね。
ここいらに雨があったのはちょうど先週なのか。中身が水にやられた様子はないから、最長で6日前からでしょうね。
この財布の存在は署内で誰が知ってます？
初期対応の南沢駐在所の警官、それから遺失物対応で係が2、3人。あとは私とあなた。内緒の事件と関係があったらまずいでしょ。ベラベラとは喋ってないつもりですよ。
電話を借りていいですか？
どうぞどうぞ。外線は0発信から。
I dialed the phone number inscribed on the examination card. I could hear a pulse pounding inside my head. I could hear could there possibly be something so absurd? The address on the receipt and the card inside the wallet were all from around the area where the grandson lived. The name on the examination card was also a match. Time was deduced that the wallet had been left behind, also matched up with the timeline of the kidnapping. Of course, it was possible I could just laugh it off as a big pile of coincidence. There wasn't any strong evidence. Rather, all the circumstantial proof, the content of the phone call I was about to make would have a much greater meaning.
どうも、こちらは沖宮署です。実はお財布の落とし物がありまして、所有者の連絡先ご協力をいただいても、お財布の中にそちら様の診察カードが入っております。ええ。氏名は犬飼俊樹くんです。カードの番号を申し上げますので、電話番号をお調べいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。ええ。お願いできますか。
Still holding the receiver, I pulled out a notebook from my breast pocket with my free hand. I opened up to the page with the grandson's address and phone number recorded on it.
どうもすみません。はい。お願いします。
I compared the number written in the notebook to the one that was being read out on the other end of the line. During the process, I spun around to look behind me uneasily. I locked eyes with Ooshi. Ooshi looked puzzled, wondering what the matter was. Why would I feel uneasy and look behind me? That was because the person on the end of the line was reading out the number as though doing so straight from my notebook. It seemed the HQ was quite an uproar thanks to my report. No matter how many times the authenticity of the evidence I had linked to the grandson was called into question, I could only respond that it was the truth. When the lead investigator first picked up the phone, I was grilled about the evidence I found that was almost too good to be true, if I do say so myself. But after having doubt dispelled, he fell into silence. The receiver was finally handed over to the section chief. When he picked up, the background thrum on the other end of the line disappeared, and I knew that it had gone completely silent. After asking the same question about the wallet that the lead investigator did, the chief quietly spoke his next words.
わかりました。こちらから何人か増援を送ります。今日の夕方には到着できるでしょう。赤坂君は引き続き現地調査をお願い。財布が発見された地域の情報を収集しててください。加納さんは何人か選んで現地へ直接。
The fact that he was sending Kano, the lead investigator here, meant that the chief had decided there was a possibility that the Onigafuchi guardians were somehow implicit in the kidnapping. However, it felt as though until the lead investigator, whom he trusted, had verified the evidence with his own eyes, he was still going to be skeptical about it.
どうでした？
本庁から増援が出発するそうです。私は現地調査を命じられました。財布の落ちていた場所はどこ？
高津戸のあたりだそうです。ここが沖宮。ずーっと行ってここがひなみ沢で、さらに上流にぐーっと上がっていくとこの辺が高津戸です。
Huh. Okay, so it's actually further. Oshi explained where the wallet was found and pointed to the location on the map on the wall. The place was Takatsudo. Was even more remote than Hinamizawa was.
高津戸界隈はほとんど民家なんかありませんよ。昔の廃村です。無人の家屋が点在するなんとも寂しいあたりですね。
大石さん、高津戸へ案内してもらうことはできますか？
構いませんよ。赤坂さんお一人ではなかなか自由にひなみ沢に出入りはできないでしょう。無論また野球帽とマスクをしてもらうことになりますが。
That Oyoshi had agreed to accompany me was very reassuring. If Sato-san's info was to be believed, my cover had been blown. I was sure that the villagers would realize that the fresh meat dispatch from the police safety was a tourist that had visited the village yesterday, in other words, me. By deciding that they hadn't noticed would have been overly optimistic. Given a cursory thought, Takatsudo, where the wallet was found, couldn't be ruled out as a hiding spot for the kidnappers. The Takatsudo area didn't have any residential buildings, nor was it alongside a highway. There wasn't a reason for even the locals to go out of their way to visit it. It was exactly what you would call a long-forgotten ghost town at the end of the road. So then who was the one who found it? If people don't go out there, who was the person who found the wallet? You couldn't ask for a better place to hold a kidnapped grandson. Also, you couldn't get to Takatsudo without passing through Hinamizawa first. Those several conditions made the area all the more important. I couldn't brush it off any longer. There was no longer any doubt that Onogifuchi guardians, or someone hired by them, were involved in the kidnapping. If that was the case, then the fact that this wallet was found might have already been leaked to them. They even knew so much as how the Public Safety Division was operating. The case of the wallet couldn't be something they didn't know. In that case, there was a possibility that the enemy was lying in wait. To drive alone into enemy territory surrounded by enemy to drive alone into enemy territory surrounded by enemy territory. What the fuck is this sentence? To drive alone into enemy territory surrounded by enemy territory, to say the least, required an amount of courage, nay, recklessness that I just did not have. Okay, that was definitely not a good translation.
大石さんの同行がなければ、そうおいそれと踏み込めない村でしたので、ご協力いただけて、正直なところ、またお金を要求されるのではと。
それは正直を言えば、ひなみ沢なんか好き好んできたがな。運賃でも弾んでもらいたい気分ですが、でも一緒にタコを囲んだ友人の頼みとあれば断るわけにはいきませんしね。
Oshi grinned as he pounded me in the back. It struck me that he just didn't want to jump ship rather than having any sort of sense of duty towards his job. Even so, that didn't really matter. Right now, I really appreciate the gesture.
早速出してもらえますか。
If the enemy knew that the police had obtained the wallet, then they would probably have moved the hostage to a different place. There wasn't a moment to lose. But Oishi, without regard to the fact that we were about to head out, began to remove his
何
jacket.
を知ってるんですか。
まあ用心ですよ。家中の栗を拾うなら相応の用意が必要と思いましてね。あなたも来ますね。
Oishi pulled from the drawer below the desk was a stab-proof vest. His name was Toshiki Inukai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction Inukai. There was only one reason for him being here. If you didn't include gym or art class, his grades were above average. That was the result of having private tutoring sessions twice a week. If you omit the fact that he still couldn't do pull-ups, there wasn't much else that would make him hate school. Of course, he understood full well that his grandfather was a cabinet minister. But he also knew that not too many people were that interested in their relationship. He didn't like to go out of his way to bring up his grandfather or to call him the Minister of Construction. And finally, he at least tried to know a little more about what kind of work the Minister of Construction did than your average Joe. What that entailed was that when you tried your best to make life better for the masses, sometimes you make a few enemies. They knew that all too well for the time that he spent as class representative. His grandfather had many enemies. He knew that he might possibly catch some of the fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents. That's why the moment he was kidnapped, he instantly knew that this was one of those occasions. He understood that he wasn't being treated as Toshiki Inukai, the person, but rather Toshiki Inukai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction. That he wasn't personally at fault, but that this was the result of unavoidable trouble with his grandfather's work. It made little difference, but when he realized it wasn't because of anything he did, he was able to relax, if only a little. Of course, at first, he was struck with a terror befitting his age, wondering what was going to happen to him. But after a while of him being tied up and only being able to stay lying down, he began to ponder a great many things. First, he thought about the reason he was being abducted like this. He understood the answer to that easily. He wasn't taken hostage to coerce his grandfather, the minister. There was no doubt about that. He was taken hostage to coerce his grandfather. He didn't know exactly what Minister of Construction did, but it was easy to imagine that there was much to be gained from threatening him. He respected his grandfather more than most. He earnestly believed that his own grandfather was within the top 20 of the most important people in Japan. That was exactly why he wouldn't forgive anyone who tried to threaten his beloved grandfather. More importantly, he wouldn't forgive anyone who would use him as a tool to threaten his grandfather. His grandfather was really busy and rarely had time to meet with relatives. That's why, with that what little time he did manage to scrape together, he just dropped by unannounced. And as an apology for not being able to meet during New Year's or summer vacation, he doted his grandson very, very much. The number of times that Toshiki was looked up with disregard just because his grandfather was a politician and a minister certainly weren't few. But he never thought even once that he wanted his grandfather to quit being a politician. Because it was his beloved grandfather, he wanted him to continue his career as long as possible from the bottom of his heart. However, Toshiki was now being held hostage, and his grandfather was being threatened. His grandfather, who called him the apple of his eye, was surely suffering. He might do anything to save his grandson, maybe even put aside his ideology if it was required to save his grandson. He might cave into the culprit's demands if it meant saving his grandson. When Toshiki thought about that, an inexplicable anger welled up within him. In his current situation, he was unable to forgive the cowards who would make his beloved grandfather suffer by using such dastardly means. That feeling swelled up inside of him, displacing the fear. What he thought at first was something any boy would imagine. Get out of these bonds, beat out the bad guys, then hand them over to the police. Imagine of all the brave heroes from the manga he had read pass through the back of his mind. In his imaginary scenario, he slipped his bonds easily, floated like a butterfly to evade the captor, then stinging like a bee to bring them all down. In the end, it was nothing more than a silly little fantasy, but with his vision obstructed and unable to see anything, it was something that could get into that he could get into more than any anime at the moment. In actuality, he was enjoying these little scenarios in his head for a long period of time. He was tied up. His captors hadn't really done anything to him that they would feel sorry for. However, eventually he began to grow tired of these fantasies and more realistic scenarios began to run through his head. It was then he realized that none of them were a solution. Yes, he wanted to do something for his grandfather who was being threatened. That he was being held here to inflict pain on his grandfather was the thing that could easily forgive and also most vexing. And then he noticed there was a much simpler way he could save his grandfather without having to beat up his despicable captors. That was to remove himself as a hostage from the hands of these villains. If he was to disappear from here, his captors would have nothing to threaten his grandfather with. The captors had restrained him, but they didn't threaten him roughly, and they made sure he was fed well enough, meaning at most he was nothing more than a means for their threat. They weren't looking to bully or kill him out of spite. If he behaved, no ill will would befall him. Realizing that gave him a strong sense of courage. And carrying his train of thought this far, he let it run its course into its natural conclusion. Right now, at this moment, Toshiki Inukai had decided to escape. His ears had been stuffed with sponge-like material, acting as makeshift earplugs. However, they didn't actually do much to block out the sound, and he could overhear everything his captors were saying. Realizing this, he was to his advantage. Even when his captor spoke to him, he acted like he couldn't hear them due to the earplugs. His captors, thinking that he could hear the conversation, talked about all sorts of things without any reservations. Thanks to that, he was able to obtain various pieces of information. First off, this was in Tokyo. It seemed that this was quite a distance away, and on top of that, it was the countryside, nestled deep in the mountains. It also seemed that his captors were inconvenienced living out here, so he could deduce that this place was far removed from any sort of town. Finally, whatever they want out to buy food and other supplies, they would always take a car. The fact caused him some dismay, because he knew that the method he learned at school of running around blindly while shouting for help wouldn't work here. He paused his little mental escape scenario there. The ultimate goal was to find someone who would help him. If somebody who fit the description wasn't close by, his chances of escaping successfully grew slim. This desolate, far-off land deep in the mountains. A place where you couldn't go shopping without using a car. In this situation, escaping would be very difficult. He grew desperate, and after a little while, he returned to his original scenario. Imagining becoming a hero like a manga he read and beating down these captors became his respite. However, as he played those delusions out in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape. And then he thought of a way. If the goal was far away, then all he had to do was to get closer. His goal, in a nutshell, was to find someone who would help him. In other words, someone other than his captors. If he faked being sick, then the captors would have to take him to the hospital, or bring a doctor to him. That would probably be reluctant to do that. They would probably be reluctant to do that, but he already knew that the hostages were more important than anything. In the options that something happened, like him dying occurred, they wouldn't be able to threaten anyone anymore. Luckily, he had an experience that would help him fake the serious illness. At the end of last year, he was inadvertently involved in a car accident and had to undergo surgery. A scar from the surgery was still clearly visible on his lower torso. He recalled the pain and suffering from that time. The existence of that experience would make a huge impact on the realism of his performance. He was quite confident in his ability to fake an illness. His captors at first took a look as a sign he needed to use the washroom. Untying his arms, they tried to bring him there while he was still unblindfolded. But he didn't try to get up. His hands, now free, only clutched at his abdominal and writhed in agony. Still has his earplugs in, so he pretended he didn't hear his captors asking the question. He was about to nod, so he hurried, had to stop himself. His captors locked down on his suffering for a bit. One of them proposed a course of action, while the other laid his doubts that Toshiki might be faking it.
腹痛むんかい？そいつ耳を塞いでるから聞こえてないぜ。参ったんな。腹痛に効く薬なんかあらんね。薬局行って買ってくるか。腹痛って言ったっていろんな薬があるだろう。症状がわからないうちはいい加減な薬は買えないぜ。腹押さえてるし、便秘やん。便秘薬でも買ってくれば収まるやんね。間違って飲んでも死なんしな。決めつけるなよ。盲腸とかかもしれないだろう。俺のおじさんがさ、昔急になったことあって、あれはかなりビビったぜ。
One of the captors leaned over beside the boy, who was bent over in agony.
かわいそうにな。全身汗だらけじゃないかよ。腹か？痛むのか？おいおい、痛むんならあんまり抑え込んじゃかえって悪いぞ。
Realizing that his captors were concerned about his stomach, he inadvertently let his shrill rise up, letting the scar from his surgery come into plain view. His vision was still obscured with packing tape, so he couldn't see their reaction to the scar. But his captors were taken aback, and judged from their momentarily silence, he had obtained the reaction he was looking
おい
for.
やばいぜ。この手術跡はそんなに昔のものじゃないぜ。その小僧、体温計あるん？あるわけねえよ。でもすごい汗だぜ。おでこは結構熱いと思う。緊張状態が続くとさ、昔の傷なんかに応えたりするって聞いたことあるぜ。じゃあどうすんよ。薬じゃ治らんちゅんてんか？何の手術跡か知らねえけど、とにかくまずいだろ。下手すると命に関わるぜ。まずいんて。これは本当にまずいんて。医者に見せた方がいい。このままじゃ突然ぽっくりいっちまう可能性だってあるだろう。
Toshiki Inukai, with those few words, he knew the situation was progressing exactly as he had envisioned it, and snickering to himself on the inside, pressed his act even further. He didn't even need to see to know that his captors were panicking and were running around like chickens with their head cut off. Cut off at this troublesome turn of events.
診療所連れて行くか。先生を連れてくる方がいいね。入江の先生か？いいのか？大丈夫か？人質に何かあったらまずんね。しゃあない。緊急事態やん。
One of the captors hurried left in the car. Another of the men, completely shaken up at this point, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. It looked like they were bringing a doctor. As long as his doctor wasn't an accomplice, the doctor was his goal. He was someone he should seek help from. His captor were probably wary of what happened, that happening. They would be prepared for it. This would all come down to luck. Some of the sweat emerging from his brow was from the nervousness. At that moment, a packing tape that was covering his eyes and ears were turned off. The burning light that he was seeing for the first time in several days hurt his eyes. After that, a gag that made it hard for him to breathe was also removed.
大丈夫か小僧。今お医者を連れてくるからな。しばらく我慢してろな。
The doctor was coming. Now how was he going to ask for help, and how was he going to get away from his captor? The plethora of thoughts began to swirl around through his mind.
お医者に余計なことは言うなよ。俺たちも別にお前に乱暴がしたいわけじゃないんだ。そりゃ分かってるよな。
Toshiki Inukai nodded while feigning pain and obedience. His expectation and the enemy's expectations. Whether they doubted he was faking his illness or not, they knew what his goal was and would try to stop it. His stomach contracted from the stress of this gambit, made it seem like his stomach really was starting to hurt. No, it really was. But there was no reason to panic. If he failed with his approach to the doctor, there was nothing to lose. If there was something to lose, it was this method of faking illness to get in touch with the doctor. If he could think of another method from here on out, it wasn't much. But at the present, this was the easiest and most dramatic way he could think of. And the more he thought about it, the more it looked like this was his first and last gambit. Eventually, he heard the sound of a car approaching once again. The sound of the car doors began hurrying down and shut. The sound of several footsteps approaching. A young man in a white medical coat. He acknowledged the boy. A suspicious look showed itself on his face.
彼は村の子じゃありませんね。
The captors didn't respond. From the look of it, the young doctor had realized that this was an abnormal situation. One of the captors talked threateningly.
先生には関係のないことです。
For a while, the doctor and the culprit slightly glared at one another. However, unable to stand the sight of the boys continuing to suffer, the doctor and the captors had hoped didn't pass any further.
その古い手術跡というのが気になり、何の手術でしたか？
そりゃわからないです。
本当は診療所に連れ帰るべきなんですがね。
先生、そりゃさすがにちょっと。
The doctor said he wanted to bring the boy back to the clinic, but the captors simply slightly shook their heads at the notion. It was a fleeting hope, but it was the only natural that the captors would refuse. At that moment, his eyes met with the doctor. Seeing that the boy's painful state was abnormal, the doctor suspected it was a serious illness.
大丈夫ですか？私は医者です。この手術跡はいつ頃のものですか？
去年の冬に事故で。
事故？そうですか。参ったな。
He couldn't let the doctor figure out that he was faking it here. He had somehow figured out a way to keep this going and tell the doctor that he was being confined and needed help.
患部を少し触りますよ。痛むところがあったら言って。
Seeing that it was extremely painful, the doctor crossed his arms and began to ponder. He had to somehow get himself to a hospital. If Toshiki Inukai faked this illness was the performance of a lifetime. Okay, so this is what I'm wondering. Was Coach involved in like getting the wallet out there to be found, essentially?
皆さんもご苦労さんなことです。
Also, I didn't realize this, but Coach looks pretty much the same as he did like in the future. I don't know if it's just they didn't want to make a new sprite, but like, it's so funny. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Yeah,
も
good
うついで
work.
しょうが、せいぜい頑張ってくださいよ。不法投棄のダンプが現れたらすぐにご連絡ください。急行いたしますのでね。
ご協力感謝しますよ。大井さん、どうぞ。
A gap wide enough for a single car was opened up in the barricade. Oishi, showing his gratitude or perhaps threatening attitude with a short, deep beep of the horn, rolled the car forward through the checkpoint. This time, my appearance was the very embodiment of the word suspicious. A baseball cap, a mask, and sunglasses. On top of that, even though it was sweltering, I was wearing a hoodie. Any respectable police officer would be loath to not stop me for questioning. I had meant to be overcautious, fully knowing well that my face was known, but it might have already been too late for that to have any use. Using that as an excuse, I doffed the unbearably hot hoodie and winter windbreaker, ripped off the mask and hat, and threw them to the seat behind me.
ありゃ、いいんですか？
こんな小細工したところでどうせ割れているでしょうから。
そりゃまあそうでしょうな。
Oishi, probably thinking that my unexpected behavior was funny, continued to laugh. Yo, this guy's always laughing. The beautiful and pristine scenery of Hinamizawa spread out before me. The village itself had been quite beautiful if it weren't for the complicated circumstances surrounding it at the moment. I would absolutely love to take Yuki for a drive one day. Come to think of it, I didn't get a chance to call her last night. I played around with the idea in my head. But in reality, this village wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I had heard everything at the prefectural headquarters. At the heart of the village, the intelligence network that the three families welded was due to blood ties and regional relationships with unbelievably well organized. Their net spread not just around Hinamizawa itself, but encapsulated the entirety of the city of Shishibone as well. When I first heard that, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I didn't take it completely seriously. How could a local organization out in the boonies here have something so grandiose? I couldn't deny that somewhere in the back of my mind, I had ridiculed. In the back of my mind, I had residual the thought, but not only were they really threatening the minister, but they had demonstrated they had a complete grasp on our movements, which were supposed to be top secret. They were almost like a secret police that controlled a small Eastern European country like in some spy novel. The villagers here weren't Bat and I at getting their hands dirty if it meant fighting the dam project. I almost heard something like that at the prefectural headquarters. And now that you mention it, when I first arrived here, Orochi also said this place was a war zone, didn't he? The residents of this village were at the same time freedom fighters. Although by definition they were no different than guerrillas or a militia. They weren't protected by the Geneva Convention, but they also didn't have to adhere to those rules either. This place was more of a quagmire than a legitimate battlefield. A secret war was unfolding. I could drive along because Oishi was with me. But if it was to leave this car for even something as trivial as looking for a vending machine, there was a chance I wouldn't return. Even though a single shot hadn't been fired, this was a battlefield. No, the reason why bullets weren't flying was simply because it was hard for a civilian to obtain a gun in Japan. So they were probably just equipped with weapons other than guns that were easier to obtain. That was why Oyoshi was wearing that staff-proof vest, wasn't he?
赤坂さん、緊張してます。
The fact that I was apprehensive was, of course, picking up on by Oyoshi. If he already figured it out, there was no point in trying to deny it or hide
も
it.
ちろんです。敵の本拠地にたった2人で乗り込んでいるこの人数では万一の時が不安です。
万一の時大丈夫ですよ。
この村の人間すべてが敵ではありませんでしたか。全員が口裏を合わせればこの村で白昼堂々殺人が起こっても証拠一つ残らない、そういうところだと聞いていますよ。
This was the ironclad rule of not barging into the Yakuza office alone was about. If there wasn't a natural party involved, if there wasn't a neutral party involved, the area wasn't bound by the law of common sense. If something happened, you wouldn't be able to prove it, and there wasn't anyone who would take your side. It was pretty much the definition of poking
ひな
the
み沢
bear.
地区へ向かうと同僚に言い残してますしね。万一の時は無線機もありますし、赤坂さんが怖がってるほどね。そう簡単には完全犯罪はできませんよ。まあもちろん油断をしないに越したことはありませんがね。
Dun.
赤坂さん、緊張しすぎですよ。前にご一緒してた時の方がリラックスしてらしたじゃないですか。な
Laughing it off, Oyoshi thumbed his chest and grinned, as if to say I could depend on him.
まあ本当の本当にヤバくなった桜の大門にはこいつがありますからね。
Oyoshi made a motion by sticking out his index finger. It was undoubtedly the image of a gun.
役に立ちますか？
撃った後の後始末云々が怖くなければ実に心強いですよ。
An officer's gun was only for show. If you really wanted to fire it, there was quite a number of stipulations, and you had to be prepared for a long probationary period afterwards. That definitely wasn't worth it. So even if an officer did unholster his gun, there wasn't one who actually wanted to pull the
赤坂
trigger.
さんは持ってるんですか？これ。
まあ、一応。
撃ったことは？
ありますよ。訓練で。
そりゃそうでしょうな。
なら大石さんにはあるんですか？
私ですか？ね。まさかあるわけないじゃないですか。
What was this? I thought he was laughing at me because he had experience. The two of us laughed
銃
together.
口を向けたこともありませんがね。銃口を向けられたことなら何度かありますよ。銃口を覗かされるだけで寿命が3年は縮むな。
Even if he had never fired his gun before, you couldn't even begin to comprehend the amount of experience Orochi had over me. At a time like this, I could only marvel again at how reliable Oyoshi seemed.
そういえば日の高いうちにこっちには来たくなかった。でも車道はここを抜ける以外にないし。赤坂さん、念のためもう一回マスクで顔を隠してください。
どうしたんです？
冷房がうるさいから聞こえないかな？切りますよ。窓を開けてみてください。
I opened the window and blasts of hot air blew inside, and then I could hear angry yelling coming from far away. At that moment, the forest gave way on either side of us, and our view expanded suddenly. And there we could see at the Hinamizawa Dam construction grounds, the very front line of the Hinamizawa village. The crackling blare of someone's voice sounded over the enormous loudspeaker. The roar of angry voices continued to rumble. The incredible volume had become a variable sound common, swept out its ammunition. The prefabricated site office was surrounded by two sets of high fences laced with barbed wire. Lined up in front of those fences were riot police and their vehicles. And surrounding it all were the villagers. They held out their protest signs and the dam as a sign in time. Wait, they held out their protest against the dam as a single entity.
ついてます。
少ないんですか？
ええ。多い時だと道路までいっぱいになりますよ。
Ooh.
うちうち車も通れません。
Wait, whoops. You wouldn't even be able to inch forward in the car. At first, due to their overwhelming insanity, it looked to me like they were more people than there actually was, but upon closer inspection, there were at most 50 to 70 of them. But the 6 or 7 propaganda trucks lined up that looked like they belonged to a band of thugs were a strange enough sight. The villagers were also wearing helmets and bandanas, as well as covering their faces with masks, adding to the oddity of it all. The propaganda trucks, after braying their chorus, had their very volumes turned up even higher and began to flood the area with sutras. To say that the noise was downright violent wouldn't be an understatement. From the distance, it was still this loud. The glass in the office was probably rattling from the
あ
noise.
れをガンガンやられるとたまんないんですよね。昨日の連中全員耳栓してて、それでも耳がおかしくなるそうです。気の毒な話です。
騒音規制でなんとかできないんですか？
うちの県には騒音規制に関する規定、それにほら、お経でしょ？宗教活動規制できないし、
Oh wow.
連中も頭いいんです。
Is what I think or she said. Actually, no matter how tightly the window was shut, the booming sound of the sutras still filled the car. I couldn't even hear what Oyoshi, who was sitting right next to me, was saying. As the car approached the line of propaganda trucks, the blare became difficult to bear. It wasn't enough to just plug my ears with my fingers. I had to hold my head to keep my skull from splitting apart. If I had seen this terrifying energy sooner, I would have probably understood what Hinamazawa village was much quicker. Now I knew they wouldn't blink an eye at sacrificing themselves in order to protect their hometown. Ah, so goddamn noisy. Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. My head throbbed and felt like it was going to split apart. My eardrums crackled, and on top of it all, I felt like I was going to throw up. With the road crowded with the throng of squatters, the propaganda trucks and the riot police vehicles, it was in no way easy to get by. Even if you tried to shoo the squatters with the car horn, they were also wearing earplugs, obviously to noise, oblivious to the noise from the outside world, and wouldn't easily move. The car could only inch forward at a snail pace. And then the car eventually got through, starting to leave a tremendous noise behind.
ほら、昨日一緒に麻雀やったメンツにお年寄りさんいたでしょ。覚えてます？
I remember that there was an older person who didn't exactly mince words. The guy Oyoshi called old
いらっしゃい
man.
ましたね。
彼ね、第一航空の現場監督さんなんです。あそこのプレハブの中でイライラしながら仕事をなさってるんでしょうね。お気の毒なことです。
あれが毎日ではたまったものではないでしょう。
耐えかねて辞めちゃう人が後を絶ちません。まあ、その度にお給金がアップしてるんで何とも言えませんが。
Even having to deal with all the noise and hostility, they still made a wage that Oyoshi found
ちくしょう、こいつら。
enviable.
聞こえてるのか聞こえてないのか。
Can they hear or can't they? A group of squatters were in the way of the car. Oyoshi, sufficiently annoyed, laid into the horn, but there was no indication that they were moving anytime soon. In this dim, they could they not even hear a car horn, or did they hear it and were being malicious? If there were any riot police nearby, they would have made people move, but it just so happened there weren't any around here.
ちょいと待っててください。
She opened up the door. Hot air and even more heated roars of the crowd spilled into the air. Oh my god, it would be so fucking dank. Like, it would be so dank over there, man. I would not want to be there. Like the hot ass air and then people just yelling and making noise and shit. Like, yeah, fuck that, man. Hold on, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Or she said something as he grinned widely, but I couldn't hear what it was. He was getting them to move. Something like that? Or she stepped out of the car and closed the door. The din faded slightly. I stared blankly as Oyoshi headed towards the group and started some sort of conversation. Maybe we'd find the minister's grandson at Takatsudo. At the very least, I wanted to find him there. Find him and slip the cursed bond of this incomprehensible village. I could only pray. At that moment, a shadow was suddenly cast over me. Someone was standing right outside the passenger side window, blocking the sunlight. I spun around, looked up, and realized who the backlit figure was. Oh shit! Yo, Rika, what are you doing, girl? You, what do you say, meep? You wanna meep around? It was a girl. It was Rika Furude. The girl stared down at me with a broad look in her eyes. I didn't have any justifications for it, but I felt like I had been found. Oh god. I didn't have any justifications for it, but I felt like I had been found by someone I shouldn't be found by. To fill the silence, I raised my hand as mouthed a meek greeting. Of course, there was no way she could hear my small voice in this clamor. But even then, she should have seen me waving my hand in greeting. In spite of that, she simply stared down at me with a cold look in her face. At that moment, the noise and heat spread throughout the car once again. Or she had returned to the driver's seat. Taking a look, the group that were blocking the road had started to move aside while glaring our way.
お待たせしました。行きましょうか。
Yeah, let's go. Nani? Oishi registered the figure of the girl behind me. One of the villagers came over and picked her up. In a manner of, it's dangerous, get away. It was then that she whispered one or two words, however, I couldn't hear any of it.
さて、飛ばしますよ。もちろん、法定速度遵守で。
Cheese it! As if to shake off the still audible angry voices, Oishi floored the gas. Along with the roar and the din and the shouting, the villagers and the girl quickly disappeared
こ
behind
の
us.
先を抜けると高津戸地区です。銃撃戦の覚悟は大丈夫ですか？ 安全装置外すの土壇場でとちらないでくださいよ。
Yeah, motherfucker. Oh, she laughed mockingly again. I was more concerned with the girl had said. However, as I was vaguely bothered by it. What was she trying to say with that apathetic and candid expression?
今から緊張したって仕方ないですよ。むしろ収穫がなくて勇み足って可能性だって十分にあるんですから。
But there was no longer a way to confirm what the girl was trying to tell me. It might have been that girl who warned me to go back to Tokyo again, or else. Was saying to me who was here now, ignoring the warning.
警告したのにバカなやつ。
I had a feeling she said something like that. Okay, so yeah, this is like a multi-part. I thought that was the end of it. If you were to call Hinamizawa a rather lonely village, then Takatsudo was outright desolate. Wait a minute, isn't that not the torture chamber that Mion sent us in? For your everyday city boy like me, I couldn't understand why anybody would force themselves to live here. There were signs that people had, but they weren't all covered up in dust or enveloped in ivy, indicating that it was all
こん
abandoned.
なところにも人は住んでいたんですね。
まあ昔の話でしょうな。こんな偏僻なとこじゃ年寄りには辛いですし、若者だってもう少しまともな土地に住みたいでしょうしね。後を継ぐ者がいなきゃ最後にはこうなるってことでしょうな。
There's a lot of villages in Japan that are like that. I think America has some things like that as well still. But I know it's like very prevalent in Japan that like just like a lot of villages are like dying out essentially. Even if I had no personal attachment to the village, seeing the disused building made me feel a little sentimental. It seemed that Orochi also felt the same way.
こんなところで財布が発見されたんです。財布の取得者もよくこんなに偏僻なところに通りかかったものですね。
ああ、村人には山の中に畑を持ってる連中がいましてね。そういう連中は朝晩ここを通りますから。
畑仕事の村人たちは早朝や夕
まさか行けるところまでは車で行くでしょうな。
早朝や夕方にこんなところを走行して落ちているたった一つの財布。
できたんでしょうな。
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, who the hell came out over here? Who gave the thing?
どこで取得したと言っていますか？
Where did they exactly
もう
find
少
it?
し先を行ったところにある茂みです。取得者はたまたまお腹が痛くなってちょいと茂みで用を足そうと思ったらしい。それで偶然見つけたらしいんですよ。中にちり紙でも入ってるのを期待したんですかね。
話ができすぎているように感じます。
Yeah, I was about to say, this does not seem
財布発見の当初から
does not seem likely.
そういう違和感が拭えません。
I expressed the feeling that I had from the start of the day, quite frankly. It seemed too good to be true, but it was unwavering proof. But it was too perfect, sickeningly so. That was my
で
feeling.
きすぎってな、案外当たってるかもしれませんよ。
というと、
実は四課のお友達からちょいと聞いたんですがね、園崎お涼が大臣の孫の誘拐事件について言及したって話なんです。
言及した？
大臣の孫ももう誘拐されてから何日にもそろそろ解放されるといいな。そう、お涼のばあさんが縁側でぼそりとつぶやいたってな話らしいんです。で、そのぼそりが 園崎家の裏の裏のあちこちに伝えられてるようです。
Right. I heard something earlier from Sato-san, the informant, that when the leader Oryu had concerned somebody in the family would be considerate.
つまり、それは。
私はそう見てます。この出来すぎの財布発見は、孫を警察に引き渡すためのイベント。
どうして人質の解放を
そりゃ人質を解放するなんて理由は一つしかないじゃないですか。
なんです？
取引の成立ですよ。ひなみ沢ダム計画の中止を大臣が約束ってことですかね。
ダム計画なんて必ずなくなっちゃいますのです。
At that moment, those words that the girl had said resurfaced in the back of my mind. In the end, it was turning out exactly as she had proclaimed. The young girl knew the circumstances. She knew everything about the kidnapping incident from the beginning to the end.
赤坂?
The girl unexpectedly called my name.
なんだい？
東京へ帰れ。
Huh?
あなたはもう幾ばくもしないうちに、それがあまりにもみすぼらしくて気の毒。今のうちから警告し。
どうして私が後悔することにな。
いちいちうるさいな。あなたの親はあなたが赤信号の横断歩道の真ん中にいるとき、どうして危ないのかを全部説明し終えるまであなたの手を引っ張るでしょ。まず歩道まで連れ戻してから。つまりはそういうこと。
The girl who knew everything from the start to finish had warned me in the beginning. Go back to Tokyo.
赤坂の怖がり。
孫は無事見つかるでしょうが、その後はいろいろと厄介な問題になるでしょう。どう厄介になるかは、一警察官の私には想像もつきませんがね。
古出理香って少女、ご存知ですか？
What I said was such a sequitur that Oyoshi sat in stunned silence for a while.
もちろん知ってますよ。御三家の一つ、古出家の一人娘ですね。
Furude family.
どういう少女なんです？
おやおや、これは意外な人物名にちょっと驚き。公安では古出家が臭いと睨んでおられるわけで、私にも情報を分けてくださいよ。
あ、いや、そういうのじゃないんです。ちょっと気になったもので。
まあいいや。
まあいやひー。
同じ卓を囲んだ友人の質問なら答えないわけにはいきませんからね。
友人と呼んでいただけて光栄です。
で、あのお嬢ちゃんはね、まあ村中の誰からも愛されてます。中でも年寄り連中には特に
崇められる。
Worship.
よくは知らないんですがね。古出家に生まれた女の子ってのには、ひなみ沢の土着信仰ですがね。お社様の生まれ変わりだとかなんとか、そんな話があるらしいですよ。
お社様。そういえば、
Yeah, he
同
never
盟の
actually,
登り箱の中に、お社様と書かれたものがあったような気がします。
yeah, he actually doesn't know about him yet.
何ですか？お社様って。
ああ、ひなみ沢の守り神様の名前です。村にあだなす者に罰を当てるって信じられてましてね。まあ、そんな便利な神様がいたら、ダムの連中はとっくに神罰にやられているんでしょうが。幸い、今日までその罰ってやつは一つも。
村にあだなす大臣の孫が、お社様の怒りに触れ、なんて言いましたっけ？そう、鬼隠し。大臣の孫を鬼隠しにしたと、そういう筋書きになるわけでしょうか。
なるほどな。
Oh, okay.
そういうことになるんでしょうな。
お社様が下した神罰。なら、犯人はお社様の生まれ変わりである、あの少女。
Even I didn't know exactly what I was saying. The fact that Oyoshi laughed, it was a bit of a relief. Oyoshi's joyous laughter was so infectious that I began to laugh like an idiot as well.
ありゃ、こりゃ珍しい。
Oyoshi, after laying in the horn several times, rolled the window down and leaned out, waving his arm in an exaggerated manner. The car headed the opposite way. Until now, we hadn't run into any other car except our own. And of all places, it was at a desolate location. It seemed that Oyoshi knew the owner of the car. The car also chirped like its horn and came to a top.
入江の先生、こんにちは。
Okay, so the visit wasn't before. Like, I thought that was going to explain how the wallet was lost, but no. I think the family knew that. Like, oh, let's just get rid of the kid, essentially. No, wait, because him calling the doctor was the kid's idea, and the goons didn't seem like they were like actually like a part of it. He was about the other car window rolled down, revealing a young man in a white overcoat. He was about my age, perhaps a bit older, but you really can't judge someone by their appearance.
大石さんじゃありませんか。こんにちは。珍しいところでお会いしますね。
そりゃこっちのセリフです。まさかこんなところで会うとはね。どうしたんです？
いえね、ちょっとした往診です。
ありゃ、そうですか。休館とかでしたか。
いえ、そんなに大したことでは良かったですよ。
お医者の世話にならずに済むなら、それに越したことはないです。
ではこれで、急いで戻らないと、スタッフに怒られますんで。
診療所長さんも大変です。ではでは、お気をつけて。
The young doctor named Irie, after gesturing his farewell, drove forward and soon disappeared around the corner. Oyoshi drove forward, but soon came to a stop again. He pulled out a worn map book from the dash. His expression didn't have an ounce of irreverence. He was perfectly
どうしたんで
serious.
す？
今日は診療所は往診の日じゃないはずです。よっぽどの休館か、特殊な事情のある患者ということになりますね。
Oyoshi flipped to the pages, opening up the map of Takatsudo. After that, he looked around and started figuring out what our current location was.
その休館が怪しいということですか？
言ったでしょう。高津戸地区にね、住んでる人なんてほとんど、今私たちがいる道はここ。入江先生はこの道に対してこっちの方向から走ってきたと。
Having no sense of surroundings, I couldn't digest anything about the place he was indicating on the
私
map.
たちは財布の取得場所を目指しています。ちなみに取得場所はここ。でもね、高津戸地区にわずかにある民家に向かうにはそもそも道が違うんです。
つまり、入江医師は民家のない方角から来たと。
山間の段々畑で農作業中に誰かが倒れたってのでない限りね、人が倒れて医者が呼ばれたら普通は連れ帰って詳しく調べるもんです。でもさっき理恵医師は大したことはなかったと言いましたね。車には他には誰も乗っていなかったようですし。
It was someone else was in the car with him. Or she didn't say any more than that. I also said nothing more. The doctor just now examined a patient close by, only that. The noisy radio had suddenly gone quiet. The sky had just as suddenly turned the opposite color, an oppressive color. And Oyoshi mused that it might start to rain. A territorial downpour started, as though trying not to disappoint him. Eventually, Oyoshi stopped the car. The only sound that breaks the silence were the precaution of the rain on the roof and the soft squeaking of the windshield wipers.
ちょいと静か静かで行きましょうかね。
Saying that in a quiet voice, he exited the car without an umbrella, careful to not make any noise. Oishi leaned over, indicating the other side of the thicket. He was pointing to a pre-barricaded shed and a car that was parked beside it. The car looked obviously well cared for. It was a vehicle that had been left there for several years.
営林署の機材小屋です。夏場以外は利用されてないと聞きました。
あの車は営林署の職員の。
さあね、公用車には見えないですね。
Oishi was playing it cool, but my nervousness was gradually increasing.
一応は念のため。
Saying that, Oishi returned to the car. I thought he was going to get an umbrella, but he grabbed an onboarded radio instead.
もしもし、大石です。聞こえてる？こんにちは、こんにちは。
はい、沖宮 PS、大石さん、感度良好です。どうぞ。
今、高津戸地区の営林署機材小屋前です。矢後地に向かう方じゃないよ。南沢から高津戸に入る方の。
はい、確認します。
小屋に不審者。これより職質しま。5分で連絡なかったら駐在所に連絡と大至急応援パトを送ってください。よろしくお願いします。
了解しました。
じゃあ行ってみましょうかね。
Since he was first confined here, he had heard the sound of cars multiple times. So he thought of far-off sounds was far more of the same. However, the reaction from his captors was, until now, something he hadn't seen before. They jumped, reacting as if shocked by a jolt of electricity, and pressed against the window cautiously, peering outside.
営林署の人間、まずいぜ。いや、警察やんな。
One of the captors lifted the boy by his collar and pressed a blade against his cheek.
お兄ちゃん、ちょい静分かってると思うけど、大声出したりすると大変なことになるからな。
Toshiki Inukai was sure that the doctor had reported things to the police. He felt a relief, then he thought that he was safe, but not imagining that his captors would resort to violence when they were concerned. His anxiety remained unabated.
時間稼いでる。小僧連れて、ほとぼり冷めたら打ち合おう。
One of the perpetrators grabbed the boy by the collar and forced him to the stand. Of course, Toshiki Inukai tried to resist by feigning that his illness had been aggravated by the rough treatment, but his captor paid no heed. Bang, 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 whoa! The doors was violently barged upon.
ごめんください。こんにちは。
Oh, okay. I thought he was shooting. I thought, bang, bang, bang. The door was banged on again. Toshiki Inukai hesitated for a moment to respond that the voice was yelling. However, while he was being inducive, his mouth was covered, taking that option away from him. The leader of the captor waved at the other to go. The young perpetrator nodded in response while keeping the boy's mouth covered, started heading towards the back door.
はいはい。何かご用かいね。
どうも、警察ですがね。急な雨で困っちゃいましてね。
ええ、今開けますん。
The moment the lock was undone, Uoshi's face forced the door open, and with a gleam of menacing eyes, he pushed the man aside and he stepped into the room. Then in the small empty room, he was able to quickly discern that the boy he was looking for was nowhere to be seen.
私はここは営林署の機材倉庫だって何にもありませんね。
There's nothing inside the room and wouldn't indicate this was an equipment shed. There was only a mountain of blankets, indicating that someone was sleeping here alongside empty food packets spawned.
ここはずいぶん前から空っぽさね。機材がしまってあるところなんて見たこともね
でも営林署の建物でしょ。あんた営林署の人？
えわ。あんたこそ誰よ。警察？
The two of them glared at each other suspiciously. Both Oji and the man steadfastly refused to reveal their identity before the other did. The man, judging from a sharp look in Oshi's eyes, realized it would be hard to talk his way out of this one. No matter what he said, the most time he could buy would probably be only a few dozen seconds. Only the sound of the raid filled the tense moment. Just then, they heard the sound of a struggle from far off. Oshi had a hunch. There was no doubt that Akasaka, who had circling around the back, had run into the perpetrator who were trying to slip away. Oshi thought the man... as Oshi thought that, the man in front of him reacted a moment faster. The man swung with an attack that was far more intended to obscure Oshi's vision rather than actually hit him in the face. Seizing his opportunity, the man aimed to kick Oshi's groin without any hesitation, but he missed his mark, and upon unable to land the critical blow, the man trying to pin Oshi grabbed him by the base of the neck with both hands and fiercely tried to push him down. But as Oshi fell backwards, as if kicking the man upward, he dug his foot into the man's midsection, with the leg acting as a fulcrum. I actually don't know. The man was flung by and falling Oshi as if by a circle throw. The two of them squared off in the pouring rain. Oshi, as if trying to cheer himself on, grinning smugly. Then he stood up while brushing the mud off himself. Even though he countered the assault, Oshi was getting up rather awkwardly compared to the man who he threw, who swiftly swung to his feet.
Oi-sa! Hayaku!
Akasaka's voice rang out from the distance. Judging from the distance in his voice, he was already engaging in a fight and wanted Oshi to reconvene with him. But Oshi's hands were full as well. The man raised both fists into a stance that hinted at him being acquainted with karate or some sort of other form of martial art. Of course, Oshi, as an officer of the law, was directly versed in judo. He also had the moxie to have been through his fair share of fighting before. Because of that, he could tell that this man in front of him was quite a bit better at fighting than he was. Ah, damn it! Thinking that this was going to be easy just because the order came from the Sonozaki family to release the hostage had been a big mistake. Oshi played off the situation like it was no sweat. His opponent, seeing his attitude, took that to mean that Oshi was going to go down easily. The man wildly charged forward, attempting to grab Oshi. But the man managed a successful clinch from from his low stance, Orochi would be tackled to the ground and end up being mounted. It was something you saw often when children fought, but it really was a bad position since you couldn't do much once you were in it. Orochi responded to that move as also lowering his stance to collide with the man head-on. The moment they clashed, Orochi grabbed the man's lapel. As he yanked the lapel upward, he smashed into the man's solar plexus with an elbow of the same arm. It was a move from Oroshi's own personal brand of brawling judo. He then grabbed on with the man with his free hand and attempted to throw his opponent with both hands. But the man lowered his center of gravity and swung his arm in a large arc, entwining them with Oroshi's. Not only that, he had forced both of Oroshi's elbows to the outside, and Orochi, now in an awkward position, was in danger of exposing his back with his hands still clutching the man's chest. This guy practiced Aikido or grappling, didn't he? Orochi, cursing the fact that his fingers were twisted into the man's shirt and couldn't get away, released his grip, but he was still in an awkward position of being bent over. Hey, yo. But he was still in an awkward... and on top of that, at zero range. But he was still, oh yeah. The man was able to read Oroshi's movements completely as he tried to squirm his way over the better position. Bam! You know, they're swinging. And then took a palm of his hand and swiftly clapped them over both of Oroshi's ears. Holy shit. Yo, that's my ear, bro. Why are you hitting me in the ear? Clamping the ear in any other martial art except for self-defense was basically forbidden. Karate, judo, they didn't recognize it as a legal technique. It was a much more simple and dangerous attack. Orochi raised both his hands as he tried to reflexively clutch at his own ear. But before that could happen, the man wrapped his arm around Oroshi's neck. His thick bicep clenched firmly around the base of Oroshi's neck like a vice. Orochi instinctively thought he was going to be killed. After all, it wasn't hard to believe that that a man like this, who was accustomed to fighting, would crush his opponent's neck from this position. But his opponent didn't do that. He had chosen to knee to keep his hold and force Orochi to lose consciousness. That's why Orochi, at the moment, even though his face was twitching, was grinning widely. Even though his opponent had the chance to kill him, he didn't choose to. He was thinking, this guy had no intention of killing me. However, even though that might be the case, the man holding on his neck was by no means gentle. In no time at all, Oroshi's consciousness began to fade. Having the expression of being taken down countless times in judo during his student days, Orochi was utterly resigned to the fact that it was over. Ooh, Orochi lost this one. Okay. I thought we were gonna get like a full-on brawl. Akasaka was finally recovering from the intense pain of being kicked in the rather sensitive area. What? Did he get kicked in the balls? He had bumped into a caper carrying the boy by the back entrance. He had seen Toshiki Inukai's picture plenty of times and was able to immediately discern the boy in front of him was the real deal. with his mouth covered in packing tape. Also, as his limited expression was hard for him to panic over how to deal with the situation. Of course, the perpetrator didn't overlook this momentary lapse. His kick landed squarely in a critical spot, with Akasaka not even having time to call for help. The man flung the boy over his shoulders and heading towards the front of the shed. But upon hearing Oyoshi's bellowing voice, he gave up on going that direction. He had dashed off towards the forest. As he weight of the boy slung over his shoulder wasn't even as if the weight of the boy slung over his shoulder wasn't even there. Akasaka was lost for a moment. Meeting up with Oyoshi, who was fighting with an enemy, was by far the safer option, but he couldn't just lose sight of the fleeting man. Akasaka stood and chased after the captive's back. He ran through the short thicket, branches and fallen leaves crunching underfoot. The tip of the branch raked and clawed at him, small scratches inscribing themselves on his body, one after another. He kept on stepping into the puddles of mud, and his shoes were soon filled with murky water. For Akasaka, traveling through the unexplored forest was, even though this was an emergency situation, extremely unpleasant. As he said that, he regretted it immediately, as it was but a waste of breath. There wasn't a thief in the world that would politely stop when told by the police. To a city boy like Akasaka, running through the forest was an arduous task. However, it must have been no easy task either for the man carrying the minister's grandson. He neither gained nor lost ground in his pursuit. Akasaka, upon realizing that, gained back a bit of composure. Just keep on chasing him. We are running in the same conditions. In fact, the man running with an awkward stride was at far more of a disadvantage. They couldn't run forever. Eventually, he definitely trip and fall. As long as he was being hounded, he would definitely stumble. As soon as his wish was fulfilled, the man who was stepping in something and lost his balance was no longer able to bear the weight of the boy, dropped him. Akasaka, in all honesty, didn't care about the perpetrator at all, just as long as he could endure the safety of Toshiki Inukai. So it was the perpetrator ran off by himself, it was perfectly acceptable. But it seemed that Toshiki Inukai was important to the man as well, and didn't choose to just run off empty-handed. Akasaka didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. His first priority should probably be to ensure the safety of the boy, subdued the captor being less important. Grappling with the perpetrator wasn't something he planned on, but most likely it was either do or die. Akasaka's moments in indecision proved to be fatal. The man aiming right between, or rather for both Akasaka's eyes, struck out with a jab. Not wanting that, Akasaka raised both his hands to shield his face. At that moment, the man kicked his unguarded midsection. The pain almost felt like a vital organ were being squeezed out of his body, but he latched onto the opponent's legs. But soon, his opponent didn't hesitate one bit. Leaning with his sized foot, the man jumped at Akasaka, applying pressure and pushing him down. Akasaka, unable to withstand that, and fell, but under no circumstance was he letting that leg go. The man fell together in a tangled heap. The man was desperate to pull his leg free from Akasaka, but having fallen in an awkward position, was unable to. The two of them rolled around the ground, floundering about, trying to gain the advantage. But Akasaka, who was holding onto his opponent's knee with both hands, and the opponent, who was complete freedom to move his upper body, were in two completely different situations. The man gained positional advantage on Akasaka, who was still latched onto his legs and couldn't move away, and pounded full force into his head with both his fists. Not only that, he found a rock nearby and beat it against Akasaka's skull. Oh god. God damn, bro. This guy's taking some damage, man. Holy shit. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The difference between being hit with a fist and being hit with a rock was vast. Bam! Akasaka quickly thought of letting go of the man's leg to free his hands to protect his head. But if he let go here, the man would get away. If he didn't dig in here, everything would be for naught. The boy he was trying to save was right there. He was going to save him and go back to Tokyo. If he couldn't do that, then it was goodbye to this freakish village. Bam! Crack! Thud! Without looking, I could tell my forehead was split open and was gushing blood. But I didn't let go of the man's legs. How could I? I won't let go. When the man realized no matter how much he beat my head, it wasn't getting away, he used both his hands to grab my throat as if crushing my windpipe. He pulled my head back as slightly form of resistance, but it was no use. The man's hands enveloped my neck and began to crush it like a vice. It was less about the pain of not being able to breathe so much as it was the choking so hard I felt like I was going to throw up. I felt like a stomach was going to turn itself inside out, but I couldn't only endure it. Damn it, damn it, damn it! My throat hurts. I won't let go. I can't let go. I don't want to be here. I want to resolve this and go back to Tokyo. Go back to Tokyo and talk to Yuki all about our unborn child. We were going to talk about our bright future. I had no intentions of losing my grip. However, it loosened just a bit and the man's leg came free. The man kicked as hard as possible and stumbled backwards. My head was spinning and I was unable to get up right away. No, I couldn't even put strength into getting up in the first place. Even so, I couldn't back down. If I let him escape, this chance would never come again. Even just clutching their scent was nothing more than a miracle. If it weren't able to get the minister's grandson back, there wouldn't be another chance. The man tried to drag the boy to his feet and the kid was displaying some unexpected resistance, allowing me to get in unnoticed and grasp a rock the man was just beating my head over with. Now it's my turn. The rock should be able to supplement a meager strength I had left, adding more than enough power to my attack. My fist, still wrapped around the rock, dug into the side of the man's torso. It seemed like it hurt him quite a bit. The man rolled around for a bit, clutching his sides. Freed from the man's grip, the boy hid behind me. To the boy who... to the boy whose words had been waiting for the most. Oh god, my throat's drying out. Hold on a second. But the crisis was still not over. That was because even though he was still clutching at my side, the man had gotten up again and had taken the fighting stance. I could see in the man's eye the resentment at the pain I had caused him, and the confidence that he could still beat me. If we were to clash head on again, he might even stop if my head were still split open.
これ以上抵抗するな。おとなしく降参しろ。
てめえこそ小僧をこっちへよこすんだ。首の骨をへし折られていか。
誰が貴様の言いなりになどなるものか。もうじき応援が到着する。貴様らに逃げ場などない。
The man reacted adversely to the word reinforcements. That was because he knew that arguing like this wasn't a waste of time, but put him closer and closer to danger. Realizing that, the man shifted mental gears almost too quickly. The man pulled out from the back of his pocket, of all things, a gun. Oh shit. Of course, I am a police officer. It's not like I didn't know what a gun is. But having one pointed at me was something I never experienced before. Was it real? Of course it was. There was no way to replicate it in a situation like this. You villain! You villain! You stupid idiot!
なら撃ってみろ。貴様の忠誠で応援がここに駆けつけるぞ。
バカが。森の中で、しかもこの雨だぞ。銃声などかき消える。
As long as he still held that gun, no matter how much I yelled at him, it was at a disadvantage. But still, I still had a fighting chance. If I were to in his shoes, instead of wasting time yelling at each other like this, I would just shoot and take the boy. That was the fastest and would surpass any sort of further resistance from him. But the man demanded my surrender without having fired a shot, meaning that either didn't want to shoot or couldn't. In other words, the man in front of me was soft. If I could buy just a little more time, the factor that would lead to my victory was numerous. Oishi was probably on his way, and reinforcements we called before coming here should already be well underway too. Not only that, they should have contacted the local police box. Without a doubt, somebody's station at the village would be here in such quicker than that.
撃たれなきゃこいつの怖さがわからねえかよ。
どうせ逃げられやしない。無駄に罪を重ねるな。
Oh, it's at the moment I heard rustling in foliage and heavy footsteps approaching. If Oishi was coming here, it would be a whole new ball game. The man couldn't have more than one gun. I had thought that time was on my side, but I had failed to imagine that the enemy could also have reinforcements. You could tell the man was just appearing as one of the perpetrators just by looking at him.
はよせんとな。警官来るん。なん油うっとんしゃん。
くそ、大石さんはどうしたってんだ。
ああ、あの樽
The
男。
chubby fella? Yo, that chubby fella.
落としたったら泡吹いとんよ。
美味しそうだ。くそ。
The boy, sensitive to the impending danger, curled up behind my back. How could this be? Damn
期
it!
待してた相方ざまあねえぞ。観念するのはてめえの方だ。
As I backed up against a large tree while still protecting the boy, the second man also pulled out a
2回
gun.
しか言わねえ。頭抱えてそこにうつ伏せになるんよ。断る。
Ooh, did he get shot? As I shouted in protest, the blood erupted from my left shoulder, and it took a few moments to register that I had been shot. Compared to the one in the movies and drama TVs, the first actual gunshot I heard was simple and mundane. In fact, the sound was more akin to a small firework I used to buy from the corner store as a kid. But there was no comparing to the pain. It was a fear you knew only after you've been shot. The boy in his confusion tugged at my clothing, agitating the wound even further. I wanted to put a bold face and reassure him, but my voice was hoarse hearsay and had the opposite effect.
大丈夫。すでに応援は要請してあるんだ。すぐに警官隊が駆けつけてくれる。
警官が来る前にお前ん額にもっぱつくれちゃる方が早いんだ。無駄な殺生すなっちゅう本家に言われとんか加減しとん。あんまり舐めとんと容赦せんとよ。
This was bad. This was very bad. This second man was completely different beast than the first. This was the man said he'd shoot. Oh wait, so the second one was a completely different beast than the first. He had no signs of indecisiveness or mercy. If this man was going to shoot, he'd shoot. He wasn't somebody that the man like we could buy time from. I really hated to admit, but at the moment, the image of Yuki's smiling face crossed the back of my mind. I knew what that meant. I was warning myself not to throw my life away over a matter of pride. Of course, I didn't want to die here. I was just starting a new life with Yuki, and I wanted to see her face over our soon-to-be-born child. Why should I risk my life over the minister's grandson when I was at such a crucial juncture in my own life? Damn it. I need to stop rambling at myself. So what do I do now? I gave the boy and extended my own life? What a good idea. Everybody's life is precious. My own life was in danger. Nobody would blame me. Damn it, it hurts. If I had known it would be this painful, I wouldn't have played that tough guy. My biggest miscalculation, though, was the sound of the gunfire was far quieter than I had imagined. If I was only that loud, I would drown by the rain in the forest. It was something that somebody far away could hear. Oh shit. Alright, this is the right choice. Alright, hold on, let me save this shit. So, this part is running a little long, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna finish this, but I'm gonna do the right answer, and then next time I'm gonna do the wrong answer. And I didn't want to kill you, bitch.
撃つなよ。撃つなよ。帰りを待ってる妻がいるんだ。死にたくないんだよ。
叫ばんとでも歌んね。おとなしい頭抱えてうつ伏せになったら歌んだるね。
I do not understand this guy's dialect.
本当だろうな。本当だろうな。約束は守れよ。絶対だ。男と男の約束だぞ。
守ったの。男と男の約束しやよ。
守れよ。じゃあうつ伏せになるからな。なるからな。約束守るんだから銃を向けるのやめろよ。やっぱ撃つ気なんだろ。撃つ気なんだろ。俺が撃つついになったら後頭部を撃つ気なんだろ。
歌んね歌んね。わーった。しまってる。銃はしまってる。男と男の約束しやねえ。どんね。これなら文句ないんて。
ねえ、極めて文句ないですよ。
Or she came in with the cross counter. It was over in a flash. The moment he lowered his gun, Oishi didn't let his chance slip by. Oishi had been assigned the situation for quite some time from behind the two men. But since they had their guns trained on me, he didn't really have a chance to jump in. Seeing the look on Oishi's face indicated that he wanted me to create an opening, so I took the role completely. Oishi forcefully lifted the arm that was holding the gun. He took the gun from the man's hand in only an instant. The other man, who was a bit slow to grasp what was happening, pointed the gun at them, but with his ally grappling with Oishi, he couldn't pull the trigger. If the man was the one that was wrestling with Oishi at the moment, he might have shot without hesitation, but this man wouldn't shoot. He couldn't shoot. Oishi kicked the other man away while aiming the sole gun with his left hand, pulled out his own. With guns akimbo, he was aiming at both men at the same time. It was perfectly played. But heedless of the gun pointing at them, the man shouted, "Scram!" as they scattered away at full speed. It was over in an instant. The two were running away without putting up a fight was honestly unexpected. Oishi quietly clicked his tongue in admonishment, slipping both guns into his pants pocket.
あいつらもよく知ってるな。
何をですか。
逃げてる背中を警官は撃てませんからね。私も退職金が惜しいもんで。
Oishi and I grinned at each other.
君が犬飼俊樹君？犬飼検察大臣のお孫さん？
はい。
これはでかい事件になるかな。どうせトカゲの尻尾切りになるんでしょうけどね。
Oishi smiled amusedly. The fact that the Onigafuchi guardians, or rather the Sonozaki family behind them, was pulling the strings was apparent, but proving it wouldn't be easy. And with apologies to Oishi, this incident was unlikely to go public. If this caused an uproar, it would obviously lead to the minister losing his office. With HQ having decided that doing so was in the national interest, it would probably be cleaned up quietly. It might be a rough way to saying it, but this was born in the shadows, and it was going to die in the shadows. Oishi probably already understood the implications behind this incident.
とにかく非常線を張らせましょう。連中まだ一丁は拳銃を持ってるようですからね。それから犬飼君を保護して赤坂さんはすぐに病院に行かないと。
As the tension in the situation faded, the pain from the gunshot wound in my shoulder blossomed once again. My forehead was also stinging painfully and had grown hot enough to start fire. Thinking that the tension that caused me to sweat, I wiped the forehead, but what came off was a large amount of blood. I realized that my shirt had been stained bright crimson from the blood flowing from my head. I turned around. The boy was safe and sound, without a doubt. There would probably be an investigation on the man who ran, but that was for another day. At this point in time, I could safely say we had cleared a major hurdle of securing the boy's safety. As soon as I realized that, I felt like a light in the head had been hit by a power failure. My knee buckled from underneath me and the ground were feeling as soft as a cloud. I didn't feel unpleasant even as I covered in rain-soaked mud. Oishi came closer asking if I was okay, but somehow I couldn't tell. I turned off the switcher to the last light in my head. The exhaustion enveloped me. Sleep. Something softer than a blanket wrapped around me. Alright, and that should be it. Alright, that was a very kind person. Alright, I think I gotta end it. I actually am running late to something. I kind of gotta go. So I'll read the tip next time, as well as check out the other option that was happening. Overall, this was okay. Like, I'll be honest, I think action and like this type of stuff, like genuinely is not that interesting to me. Like, I liked it. It was okay, but I think this is probably like the worst chapter so far. It was kind of exciting at the beginning with finding out the wallet and then like going to like the construction site for a second. But then once we started doing this high-speed police chase stuff, it's just it's okay. The ending was pretty fun though, like with Akasaka like pretending to be like, "All right, I give up. I surrender." That was kind of fun. But overall, this was kind of okay. This was an okay chapter. I just don't think what's his name, Ryukishi does the best with like what's it called, like what's it called, like suspense heist, like action, I guess. I don't know how to call it, but like he does really well with like reveals and like suspense and like horror and stuff like that, and also intimate moments. He does really well with that. But the action portion was kind of it was okay. But yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. Anyone here, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had fun. And yeah, I'll probably stream tomorrow. So yeah, see you later. Take care. Bye.